Welcome to our 178th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's topic involves political unity. The question is it a good thing? And is it possible? I guess that's two questions. Well, what does it mean? What does it mean, and is it a good thing? Okay, our panel starts with Joe Gaines, former faculty member at the University of Akron. Patty Haskins, member and current candidate for re-election to the Wadsworth City Council. Then Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services, and Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Joe, there's been a lot of talk in the past year about political unity. In fact, our current president has referred to himself as the unifier. In your mind, what does political unity mean? And is it good for the country as a whole?
Well, I think it's interesting that we're even talking about this topic right now, because I think that in many cases, Biden wants to be united. He sees a need for it because we haven't been united. I don't know if we can do it because there's a word missing, and that's compromise. We need a compromise. We need to work together and make some changes. I might not always get what I want, but if I can get a little bit of what I want or help other people, then that's what it's all about. We forget that the reason that we exist as an election is for the people, not for the party. And too much is going on for the political party. I read that what was the Vietnam War, slavery, and other issues like that existed, political unity existed. It didn't exist, not during the Vietnam War.
Yes, it did, Joe.
I don't think so. How did it exist?
85% of the people were in favor of it.
Well, I have a friend who died because of it.
Well, that's one.
I mean, I was just at Kent last night. Well, not last night, but I've been to Kent, and there was no unity. I mean, if anything, there was more arguments against the war, in my view, maybe because of people I hung around with. I don't know.
Okay, well, excuse me, maybe I didn't make myself clear on that statement. I'm talking about at the very beginning.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, but of course, as the war went on, it became horribly divisive. But at the beginning, it was very popular.
Well, I can see that point. But I think what we need to do is work together as not as political parties, but as political people. We need to compromise. A Republican needs to give in a little bit. Democrat certainly needs to give in a little bit to get what we want, to get what is good for the people, and not just for, and not just what's good for the political party itself.
You notice when Biden took office, the first thing he did was to announce that everything Trump did as far as immigration was concerned was wrong, and he was canceling everything. Canceling the border wall, canceling everything, because it was all Trump and it was all evil. That hardly left room for unity.
I agree, but I also understand that Trump did the same thing when he came in. I'll never forget when and I didn't know who President Clinton was going to be. I didn't know anything about him, but all I know is that he was knocked from the day one that he was elected. I mean, they made names of him, made fun of him and everything else. There was no unity there. There was no attempt at unity. There hasn't been any attempt at unity, and I think politically at all. I think, though, however, locally, governments are different. I'm impressed with local governments. I really am.
Well, I don't blame you, particularly in Wadsworth. I would not expand that to all of Medina County. Wadsworth has always been politically very satisfying to me. I have voted for both Democrats and Republicans in Wadsworth.
Yeah.
In fact, I love John Hanna as mayor. I thought he was terrific. Anyway, that's beside the point. The excuse me, Patty.
Yes.
Okay, chime in, please.
Well, I'm not sure. I guess if you try to just define political unity as everyone agreeing with the same thing, that is not going to be something that we will ever achieve, nor do I think that that is something that we should achieve. I think it's important in all issues to listen to both sides, and there is rarely an issue that doesn't have two sides to it. And it's important for us to act civilly and to discuss both sides of an issue to come up with an appropriate or proper conclusion or a solve of a particular problem. Yes, there are issues that we can be totally unified on. When 9/11 occurred, that next day, this country was unified,
Agreed.
all with one common purpose. And I think that over the years, there have been issues that we can, as a country, all agree on are to be solved if they are a problem, or to continue if we want to see the growth of this country. To say, though, that a political party or that political parties are going to be unified on all issues is not something that is ever going to occur.
Or is it a good thing?
And I think it's a good thing, because we do need to have that push and pull.
The
And
disagreement is a good thing, you mean?
the disagreement is a good thing, because it
Yeah.
opens our minds that our biases perhaps do not allow us to see to those issues that we don't see, and those solutions that we don't see. Within the parties themselves, there is never going to be unity. There is within each party, there is a moderate faction. There is a faction that is ultra liberal or ultra conservative. And that occurs today within both of our major parties. And I'm sure it occurs within other parties, but it allows us to, again, see all of the different sides. Now, I may not agree with a particular stance within my party, but that is good, because I can see those different viewpoints. If we look at the Republican Party right now, there's definitely two sides to it. You have the pro-Trumps and you have the anti-Trumps. You have the pro-Liz Cheneys, you have the pro-Mitch McConnells, you have the pro-Kevin McCarthy's. You have the different sides that are presenting different topics on different or different positions on different topics. The same thing within the Democratic Party. You have the AOC side. You have the more moderate sides within the party, and they tend to enlighten, I think, each other. What we need to see for the idea of actually getting things done is more civility amongst these different sides in the present and the presentation of their views on various issues, because that will truly work to produce action and results within our country, I think.
There are individual topics, though, that I wonder if we could ever have any kind of unity on. Taxation, for one. I think that the Republicans will always be anti-taxation or in favor of tax cuts, and liberals always want tax increases. I think
That's kind of a generalization, because that's, it depends upon the issue that they're taxing for.
Right.
I think so. Even that has kind of a middle of the road thing. You could talk about right to life. That is definitely a topic that is very polarizing, and I'm not sure that you are ever going to see people come to an agreement on, because perhaps there isn't a middle ground in that case. But then there are also issues that, you know, that I think that everyone can agree on. So, you know, those are the things we have to look at.
Brian, what's your take?
Well, I'm not sure we're ever going to reach political nirvana.
No,
Yeah,
where we're all just sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya and holding hands and just everything's great. And I think our system has been designed with some of that, I guess, built-in disagreement. You know, to reach a consensus, you have to be able to accept the fact that people will disagree with you, and that as you come together, you have to give something up and the other person has to give something up. What's a little disturbing is that over the years, we've played a zero-sum game with our politics. And when we get to the point of saying, we'll burn down the house unless we get our way, I really think, you know, we've stepped away from what the founders expected of our political leaders. You know, there was a lot of disagreement about the Constitution. You know, they went toe to toe in Philadelphia for days. It wasn't like everybody got together and said, hey, we've got this document. Oh, it's great. Let's just go ahead and do it. You know, there was a lot of disagreement. And if you read any real history book about how the Constitution came about and all the people that were involved, there was a lot of friction there. And I think that friction was good because it put together a document that everybody could agree upon. When the different amendments were passed, you know, read a little bit about the Civil War and some of the Union generals. They had friends that were Confederate officers. They all went to West Point. They all participated. They didn't want the war to be turned into a slavery issue. They wanted it to be, you know, a succession issue. You just can't decide that you're going to leave the Union and pull up stakes and leave. So this built-in friction, I think, is good. But in the environment we have today, any sort of friction gets, you know, it gets blown out of proportion. You know, they say when you make legislation, it's like making sausage. You know, nobody wants to see all the different parts that goes into a sausage. You know, you probably never eat it. But we're so afraid because no one wants to get slammed for an opinion that doesn't sort of toe the mark or meet the definition of, well, you know, you're not woke or you're not up on things, you're not politically correct. I mean, some of the most revered people, when you start reading about people, you know, John F. Kennedy cut taxes. That was very unpopular, you know, but he stepped up. He realized that they had to get out of some of the melees that they were in. LBJ ended up being you know, people didn't like him because of his stance on the war. You know, he went in with both cowboy boots when it came time to Vietnam. They didn't like that. So, you know, we have to accept the fact that there's friction in our political system, and that friction creates something where both people can agree upon. I might not like it. You know, I might have to gore my sacred cow. Someone on the other side might have to gore their sacred cow. But when we come together, we can have something that we can all agree upon. So it can't be, if you don't agree with me, then I'm going to take my ball and go home. You know, and that's happened on both sides. That's happened on both sides. You cannot take, and another thing that's concerning is that we start taking off the safeties in our government, as far as, you know, different rules that have been put in place that have worked for centuries. You know, the filibuster, you know, there was talk about adding Supreme Court justices. You know, FDR tried it and his own party disavowed him. You know, his own party said, this is not going to work. We're not going to go along with it. and it died. But he did want to add Supreme Court justices because the Supreme Court was holding him back. And if you read anything about FDR, you realize he wanted it his way. You know, it was the only way. And his own party was the check and balance on him. So I really think we have to step back from this notion that somehow, if you don't agree with me, then you're the bad guy, you're evil. I don't dislike Patty. I like Patty. I like Joe. I like Ron. I say hello to them. I follow Ron on Facebook. He puts up a lot of nice pictures of food and wooden products and everything, and Patty and all that stuff. I don't go to the other side of the street when I see these people, you know? And I think that's where we've gotten, where if you say that you like somebody, oh, I mean, you know, you're basically a lone man in the wilderness. You know, how can you like those people? Well, I like these people. I think that's what works here in Wadsworth, is that once we get done with the political stuff, everybody comes together and says, what's good for the city of Wadsworth, or what's good for the county? And we lay aside this vitriol that somehow creeps into our system that, you know, you're the enemy and we got to hate you. I don't subscribe to that. So.
A good point. What's good for generally for the American people?
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
there are
Exactly. And you have to
a
have
lot of
that friction
definition.
to agree. And when that happens is it pushes out the extremes. You know, part of the process is when you start getting that friction going, it pushes the extremes out. So the extreme right and extreme left, the people that want to defund police and open up the borders and all that kind of stuff, they get pushed out the door. The people on the right that want to shut the country down, all that kind of, they get pushed out. And the middle, and that's what's missing, as far as I'm concerned, in our politics, is middle ground.
All my way, the highway, huh?
Well, Ron, chime in with your opinion.
I got interested in a little bit of the history here. I found a couple of references, and I'll just give you a couple of examples where political unity wasn't necessarily a good thing. In 1820, there was something called the Missouri Compromise that set up the boundaries between the slave and the free states. And this became pretty contentious, but people still bringing up legislation and trying to argue this one way or the other. So, and between 1836 and 1844, there was basically a gag rule. Congress agreed they weren't going to bring up any legislation pro or anti-slavery. Okay. In 1877, the Congress agreed a compromise here that we would allow the Republican Party, then formed, to have another 4 years, and we'll just forget about Reconstruction. Okay, there's a unity that happened that wasn't necessarily a good thing for the country. In the late 19th century, well, there are other things banned, you know, in that time where everybody agreed to. But in general, political unity is an illusion. We just don't have it. And I'm not leaving the Democrats off the hook here, but presently in Republicans, particularly in the Senate, they're unified in that they want to get the next election won. So the stance seems to be that, okay, Joe Biden, you're going to be, you're preaching bipartisanship and you're preaching unity and you're failing at it. Therefore, we're going to resist you tooth and nail we're not going to approve hardly anything that you say. And they did the same thing with under Obama. My biggest regret in the last election was that Mitch McConnell got reelected. So McConnell got reelected, but and I don't. And this has been said here, but all of you have said before. There's no compromise here. There's anybody who's been in a marriage relationship knows you got to have compromise, and it's true. Nobody gets everything that they want, and that's fine. I agree with Patty that you need this tension between different points of views. And you need the civility, and we don't have it. We just don't have it in national government at all. And I don't know that we're going to get it back. And in terms of the unity, I agree that we just really don't want. The only way to get that is to have a good dictator, and as long as you don't mind, locking up your dissidents, you can have unity. And I don't think we want that. That's not the way democracy is formulated to work, that we have different opinions, we try to reach compromises, we try to see what's good for the country. And right now, probably I think the population is rather more in favor of Biden's proposals than they are of the Republican proposals side. And I think the Republicans have to be worried about this, because I think that we're looking at what the people want if this continues, and have society made the business of how we're going to pay for it, and what all the taxation means. But in terms of, I think, what the general people want, I cash my stimulus check, and I want my potholes fixed. I don't want that bridge I'm driving over the Cuyahoga River to fall down. I want the government to do something about that infrastructure. We should have some common goals. We should have some common goals and be able to work on them. And we're not doing it. I don't know whether we can do it. And I agree that we probably don't want to do it as in a way that we just all come together with everything as, I love to sing Kumbaya. That's a great song, Bryan, but it doesn't work in politics.
Well, Ron, you mentioned a point about infrastructure, and I believe that we are in unity over real infrastructure, highways, bridges, tunnels, so forth. But that's only less than 10% of the so-called infrastructure bill. We do have unity over real infrastructure. Both parties have been in favor of it for a long time. Why it's taken so long to come up with some kind of a bill for it, I don't know. But I know I sound like I'm anti-Democrat. I'm really not. Not really. However, the Democrats seem to always want to add all sorts of things to a spending bill that could never pass on their own. But the infrastructure, the real infrastructure bill, not social infrastructure or anything else, is a good thing. When I think back, here's a question for the panel. Coming out of the chute in 1787, we were divided along states' rights and the strong central government. We had the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. We're still fighting that battle.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the country would have looked like had one side or the other dominated in 1787. That we had then committed to no strong central government. States had all the authority. What would this country be like?
Complete chaos.
You think so?
One thing is Washington did not want political parties.
Yes.
Well, it started. We didn't want political parties. I mean, Washington's very soon formed one, but George Washington. But we didn't want them originally. We didn't want to have parties. We wanted to have a strong, the Federalists particularly wanted the strong government. They didn't want to spread it up in different factions. They wanted to try to stay unified. It didn't work.
My philosophy, my theory over the years has been keeping your money local. So instead of sending money through a federal taxation, when it goes that far away, by the time it gets back to you, you're not dealing with 100-cent dollars. Everybody has their hand in it, and everybody is jockeying for that particular fund or that grant or whatever. So let's send the government what we normally would send the state, because the federal government was only for a limited amount of, they were only supposed to provide a limited amount of services. The defense of the country, certain things that they could do better. But the states were supposed to be the ones to make sure that their roads were good, their education systems were good, because local people know what's best for what their community is. I believe that the citizens of Wadsworth know what's best for Wadsworth instead of some guy sitting, at a desk in Washington, D.C. And if we had those types of resources, we would be in more control. And I think we'd probably be a little bit happier that our city and our state and our local county would have the funds to keep up infrastructure, to keep up the roads, to keep up our education systems, because it's the local people that keep accountability in the system. I don't feel that I'm accountable or can account for anybody, for my representative that I send off to Washington, or my senator or the president. That's so far away. I don't even feel like I have a say in that anymore. And we send a lion's share of our tax dollars go to the federal government. And that's where we lose control of it.
One quick
No,
question before we sign off. Do you believe that, do you have more confidence in the federal government, federal politicians in Washington to be non-corrupt, or state politicians? Who do you have the most faith in, to be honest?
It depends on the individual.
Right now, I don't have much faith in the state government.
Yeah, I could point out good and bad on both sides, so it'd be a little difficult to nail that down. So, by the way, I just wanted to comment on something that Bryan said about, the federal government. There are things, though, that we need the federal government for. For example, FEMA and the help that they bring into a state. To have each state only be responsible for itself. There are states that would have an abnormally high percentage of national disasters that have to be dealt with. And that combined effort of all states by way of the federal government, which is what allows those states to be helped in a sincere way. So I am concerned more. I think there are still things that the federal government needs to be used for.
Yes, national
and can help
defense
us.
for one. Right, and that,
Would we have the civil rights that we have today if it wasn't for the federal government? Would women have the right to vote if it wasn't for the civil government or for the federal government?
Nope.
There's all
I don't
kinds of
think
things.
so.
Right.
There were
Okay, well,
states
thank
that
you
were
very
letting
much,
women vote
folks.
for the feds.
And our time is up, right,
Good
Joanna?
to see you guys.
Good to be seen.